So there are several key provisions that are associated with good manufacturing practices in food safety. These are going to include general provisions, buildings and facilities, equipment, production and process controls, and defect action levels. Let's dive a little deeper into the guidelines that are associated with each of these provisions. You ready? So first, the general provisions section discusses worker responsibility when it comes to personal hygiene. We're talking things like don't hock a loogie, okay? So for example, workers who are sick or have other conditions that might contaminate food, they should be removed from manufacturing operations immediately. Not later, right now. This includes vomiting, fever, diarrhea, open wounds, boils or infected cuts, discharge from the ears, eyes, or nose, jaundice, and sore throat. Any employee suffering from these conditions must report it to management immediately, and proper documentation's got to be filed following workplace procedures. General provisions also cover employee clothing and cleanliness guidelines. Well, look, workers in the food industry aren't allowed to wear any jewelry or other unsecured objects that might fall into or otherwise contaminate the food. This includes items that are in your pocket like cigarettes and lighters, other items like false eyelashes, fake nails, perfumes, and aftershaves. These are also prohibited. Protective clothing like headwear that covers the hair and ears and, gloves, of course, these are recommended where appropriate, and even required in some cases. Smoking, eating, and drinking, well, these should only be done in designated areas like a break room, away from the food manufacturing area. Hand washing is also going to be a must when you're handling food items. So to help with this, hand washing stations have got to be readily accessible at the entrances to all production areas, and all hands should be washed regularly and thoroughly with antibacterial soap. The Center for Disease Control provides guidance on hand washing steps, so that's helpful. You'll need to use warm or cold water and lather with antibacterial soap on the back of your hands, between your fingers, and under your fingernails. You should scrub your hands together for at least 20 seconds. Maybe you're not sure how long that is. Try singing the Happy Birthday song twice. Anyway, once you're nice and lathered, you'll need to rinse your hands under clean, running water and then dry them. What do you dry them with? A towel or a hand dryer. Don't wipe those puppies on your shirt or your pants. Finally, only authorized personnel should be allowed near food handling areas. The next key provision in good manufacturing practices includes requirements for the maintenance, layout, and operations of food processing facilities. This is going to include the grounds of the facility, which have to be kept free of litter and waste and well maintained. So grass and weeds near the plant, they should be cut often. Why? Because you don't want them harboring pests like insects and rodents. These could contaminate the food production process. And trust me, they try. Drainage and waste disposal systems have got to be designed so they don't contaminate areas where food's being stored or handled. So, for example, a backflow device should be installed to ensure plumbing only flows in one direction. This is going to prevent contaminated water from backing up into food processing areas. The plant itself should be designed so that it's large enough to handle its food production purpose, be it manufacturing, processing, packing, holding, etc. It should also be designed to provide space and ease of equipment placement, storage, and maintenance. So, for example, the plant floor should be designed so that performing maintenance on one area doesn't risk contaminating another section. Cross-contamination should also be prevented by using partitions, separate locations, time between productions, airflow systems, dust control systems, or, any other effective means. Floors, walls, and ceilings, these have also got to be thought about. They should be easy to clean, and they should be designed so that condensation on them doesn't run the risk of contaminating surfaces, food, or packaging materials. Construction materials also should be easy to clean, non-porous, and chemical resistant. Some examples would be like steel and epoxy-coated surfaces. Aisle and working spaces have got to be wide enough for employees to walk through without brushing up against other surfaces, foods, or materials. What about lighting? Well, Adequate lighting has got to be provided using shatterproof bulbs and fixtures. All equipment and utensils have got to be sanitized to protect against food contamination. Only approved cleaning products should be used, and look, any toxic compounds or chemicals that do need to be kept on site have got to be properly labeled and stored away from food handling and processing areas. Make sense? Periodic testing of food contact surfaces for bacteria and other contaminants is highly recommended. This is to ensure effective cleaning and sanitization. Food manufacturing plants have also got to be equipped with appropriate plumbing, sewage disposal, toilet facilities, and trash disposal systems. In addition to these facilities points, all equipment and utensils that are used during food manufacturing must be properly maintained and sanitized. This is going to include an automatic control to regulate temperature equipped with an alarm system that then alerts workers of a change in that necessary temperature, since inadequate temperature control is actually, believe it or not, one of the most common causes of food-related illness. This temperature is going to be based on the nature of the food and its intended use. In general, think of it like this. Cold foods should be kept pretty much just above freezing. That'll be in the 32 to 41 degree Fahrenheit range. What about frozen foods? Well, they're going to be kept well under freezing. That's around 0 degrees Fahrenheit, we'll say. Food should be kept out of what we call the danger zone. That's a pretty wide range, but it's from about 40 degrees to 140 degrees Fahrenheit. The purpose of this is really to limit bacteria growth. All equipment that comes in contact with food has got to be non-corrosive, non-toxic, and able to withstand normal necessary use. This includes the use of specific cleaning materials. Equipment should only ever be used for its intended purpose. I gotta say that one more time. Equipment should only ever be used for its intended purpose. You got it? Preventative maintenance, like frequent inspections, cleaning, and following the manufacturer's instructions, is going to help prevent the risk of contamination from an equipment breakdown. If maintenance needs to be performed on machinery, any materials like lubricants and grease have got to be food grade, and maintenance work has got to be completed outside of production hours whenever that's feasible. Again, the point is to avoid cross-contamination. Any seams used in the production of the equipment, like tables and counters, need to be securely bonded and maintained to prevent a buildup of food particles or bacteria. Good manufacturing practices require food processing facilities to develop a written sanitation plan that outlines the scope, objective, responsibilities, monitoring, and record keeping of all sanitation practices. There are specific production and process controls that are outlined in the GMP regs aimed at making sure food is safe for human consumption at all stages of the process. The overarching idea is that we're trying to make sure the food we make is safe for us to eat. This includes how the food's monitored and stored. There needs to be at least one quote-unquote competent person who's assigned to oversee the sanitation process at all times. This person is going to be responsible for testing for sanitation needs, protecting against cross-contamination, and monitoring all sanitation needs. Any food that has become contaminated has got to be discarded, or, if it's appropriate, it can be reprocessed to remove the contaminant. Raw materials that are used in the manufacturing process need to be inspected and cleaned before being used. Water that's used for washing needs to be safe, and it can be reused as long as there's no risk of cross-contamination. Only potable water should be used in food processing, and any non-potable water has got to be clearly labeled and stored away from food contact areas. If raw materials are frozen before use, they need to stay frozen until they're needed. Thawing of frozen ingredients has got to be done in a way that prevents contamination. I'm really trying to hit this point of contamination and cross-contamination. I hope you're getting it. Sometimes there are times when, in the food production process, a control needs to be applied. The point of a control is to avoid, eliminate, or reduce a food safety hazard. These are called critical control points, and they're often determined during a hazard analysis. So let me think of an example. Let's say cooking meat to a specific temperature. I'm doing that to kill bacteria, right? How about another one? Using a metal detector on certain foods before packaging to make sure that there's no metal contamination. So speaking of packaging, all materials that are used for food packaging should be safe, and they should only be used for their intended purpose. The purpose of which depends on the food being packaged, of course. Food packages should be tightly sealed and labeled with information on their origin and any potential allergens. This is really essential to reduce cross-contamination and to trace packages in the case of a recall. The final key provision outlined in the Good Manufacturing Practices is Defect Action Levels, or DALs. So basically, these are guidelines as to how much of a natural or unavoidable defect is tolerable or acceptable in food. Generally, these are going to be things that aren't hazardous at low levels, and they include things like rodent filth, mold, and insects. So, for example, ground allspice, it can't contain an average of 30 or more insect fragments per 10 grams. Canned tomatoes, they can't have an average of 10 or more fly eggs per 500 grams. Pineapple juice. Yeah, I'm going to ruin pineapple juice for you. It can't contain an average mold count of 15% or more. Those are the action levels. If these defect levels are reached, that food has got to be tossed out, discarded, and it can't be blended with other foods. So look, following these key provisions in good manufacturing practices for food safety helps to keep everyone healthy, and it protects both the consumer and the manufacturer in more ways than one. Whew, okay, is that a lot to digest? Well, listen, more info on GMPs can always be found on the FDA website. Check it out.